Good Thursday to you, everybody in GOV 603. Welcome to week 7. Boom. And welcome to the remake of this video, which I did yesterday. And for reasons that I can't explain, I thought it had saved correctly. And then when I uploaded it to the announcement board, in fact, I had not uploaded the video that I made. I uploaded a video that I made for another class, which happens to be in quantitative research, but has very little to do with what we're doing in here. So my apologies. I hope you got both announcements. I sent out first the video or the announcement with the link that I thought was the right video. And when I realized that was wrong, then I sent out another announcement that, said like, oops. And so here we are. Okay, week 7. Hey, we are 1 week away from the middle of the semester. So good news there. And coming, very close to a modular week or spring break or whatever it is we say. So you're going to get a little bit of a breather there. So, I know that this time of the semester, there are things that are stacking up, papers and projects, and you might start to feel a little stressed. So it's important to stay focused, stay motivated. And in my case, that means, stay caffeinated. A little chai tea here this morning because it is cold and rainy where I live. It is still very much spring. Okay, let's get into the business. Your research design papers, part 1, are due the 24th. That is tomorrow. All right. I've had a couple of people email me and say, I'm not sure, where do I turn this in? Go into the assignments folder and you'll see, right? It's the same box that has the instruction sheet for the assignment. And there's a red heading, and it'll actually say, click here to upload, something like that. So just click on it, upload your assignment there. Okay, easy peasy. Your midterm exam is this coming March. That is less than 1 week from today. It will open on the 1st and close on the 3rd. So open on Wednesday and close on Friday. Excuse me. You have 60 minutes to take the exam. It is a 25-question midterm exam worth 4 points per question, so it's a 200-point exam. I tell you what I'm going to do. I will, right now, I'm going to give you a little bit of a review and some things to focus on, make sure that you're on top of, and you'll do fine for the exam. Okay, so first things first. A material through next week, that is week 8, will also be on the exam. So make sure that, whether or not you've participated in the discussion boards, that you've gone through the questions. And I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I normally post those on Saturday. I will post those today, Thursday, so you can have a look. So make sure that you go through the material and that you learn it. All right. Learn what? All right. So the midterm exam covers everything that we have done in the discussion boards, because I know there's, you've read a lot and looked at different things, and that, and that's good. That's good. We want to round out what we're doing. But in terms of what you're going to be accountable for, anyway, is things we have discussed in Blackboard. So anything that has hit any of those 4 questions for any of the 8 weeks is fair game. So what does that mean for you? All right. So you should be able to identify terms, to define them, and to say what they are. Know the difference between a mean and a median and this sort of thing. You should be able to recall what major authors and thinkers have said about X, Y, Z, whatever it is we've been covering. All right. So for example, let me go through a few specifics, okay, that will form part of the exam. All right. So for instance, when I say terms, you should be able to define what a t-test is. You should be able to define what an ANOVA is, both in terms of what's it for. What does it mean when we say ANOVA, when we say, when we use this acronym, right? What does that mean? What's the difference between quantitative and qualitative research? What is an analytic narrative? Okay. What's the difference, between little n and small n value? How do you calculate the standard error? What are the different kinds of graphs, and what do they look like? What's the difference between a bar graph, a line graph, and a scatter plot graph? And I mean, that should be like falling out of bed. Okay. What are you supposed to be doing in the major parts of your paper? Say, what's a literature review for? How's it constructed? What are you supposed to be doing in your methodology section? How is that constructed? Right? What's the definition of say an hypothesis? What's the definition of a research question? Think about some of the videos that I've had you watch. So, for example, Dr. Peterson, right? He talks about a distribution, a Pareto distribution. Well, what is that? What does it look like? What is it telling you when you look at that? All right. What are some of the basic underlying assumptions of empirical research? Okay, we covered this. In terms of basic definitions, know the difference between median and mean and mode. So have a working definition for these terms, right in your head. Like, what does it mean when we say recreational research? Okay, what does that mean? Beyond just defining things, because we're not parrots. We're not here just to memorize stuff and give it back. You want to process. So why, for instance, is it okay? What does blind spot mean? Why is it difficult for researchers to identify blind spots? What does that mean? Okay. Excuse me. What's the difference? Again, explanatory difference between correlation and causation. Why is causal explanation part of empirical research? Why is it that we focus on that? Why is it, or is it that as researchers we're concerned the relationship between the variables, two or more variables? Why do we do that? What is external validity? How is it improved? What takes away from external validity? Okay. Again, I think I mentioned this, but what are the fundamental differences between qualitative and quantitative research? So be able to define terms and then be able to give operational, functional definitions and recognize a discussion of those terms when you see it. And if you can do that, right, and the starting point to doing that is going back through the discussion questions, each of the 4 for each of the 8 weeks in Blackboard, you're going to do just fine. Okay, this is a closed book test. No books, no notes, no internet. Shut it off. You have 1 hour. It's a timed test, so when the hour is up and if you're not done, it's going to close. And you've got 1 shot to do it. Okay, and that's that. All right, let's take a look at the readings from last week and some of your answers and see if there's something, anything that we can add. Question number 1, what are some of the ways to improve external validity? Oh, hey, you might see that in the not distant future. Describe how you would improve external validity in your proposed research design project. Okay, Richard, external validity refers to the approximate truth of conclusions that involve generalization to the degree to which the conclusions in your study would hold for other persons in other places and times. Okay, now you're quoting from Williams, which is fine, but look, folks, and that's a correct definition. I want you to be able to translate whatever you read into simple, straightforward English. All right. So, and I'm not saying that this isn't in your wheelhouse, Richard, that you don't understand this, but for everybody else, when you see something like this, if you can't if I couldn't say, okay, explain that to me, and you know, if you could not whip around and say, well, what Williams means is da 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 da, that means you need to spend a little bit more time with that. Okay. And then I asked you, you know, how you would improve external validity in your proposed research design. All right, but let's go back to your answer, Richard, which was an excellent one. So you cite Williams by saying refers to the approximate truth of conclusions that involve generalizations and to the degree to which the conclusions in your study would hold for other persons in other places at other times. Man, what a tortured sentence. It's not yours, Richard, it's this author's. Okay, so let's put that back into plain English. Essentially, fundamentally, what external validity is, what we mean by external validity, is if we take a group of people to study, that means to run a survey through, to observe their behavior, to look at their historical pattern of whatever they did or didn't do. Okay. Can we apply the conclusions about their surveys, their patterns of behavior to everybody else in the population? Because you know, just as a practical matter, you can't survey everybody. Okay. I mean, logistically, it's nigh on impossible, and it's just cost prohibitive. It would cost too much. And here's the interesting thing about statistics: you don't need to survey everybody. Okay. If you survey a sample of people that's random, as you have a random sample, okay, that's from the population that you're interested in. So let's say you're interested in exclusively how men vote, or how women vote, or how people who live in rural areas vote, or how people who live in urban areas vote. So if you take a sample representative of the group that you want to study, and you take it randomly, and you take enough, and how much is enough? You know, and that's a topic for some interesting debate within quantitative research. Some researchers say that 30 is a minimum. I prefer to see the number of 100. So a minimum of 100 people before you can make any generalizations about the larger population concerning what it is that you're studying. That is external validity. I mean, quite literally, if you define the term, are your conclusions valid when you're outside of the group, external, that you're studying? Okay. And then Richard says your research design project is based on the hypothesis the enactment of the death penalty in all 50 states is positively correlated to a reduction in violent crime, meaning Richard is going to test the proposition. If all 50 states enacted the death penalty, violent crime would go down. Now, I don't know what your position is on the death penalty, Richard, and this is a perfectly valid hypothesis, actually a very well written hypothesis. Remember this though. You know, whether you're you know, pro or, you know, for or against the death penalty. Okay. When you're researching, be an investigator, not an advocator. Let me say it again. Be an investigator, not an advocator. In other words, let the data lead you to your conclusions. Don't start with your conclusions that lead you to only certain data. Let the data lead you to certain conclusions, not your conclusions lead you to certain data. That's poor research, and that's not what we're doing here at Region. All right, and as scholars, that's not what we're going to do, and especially in political science, that sort of behavior. There are other areas, you know, fields in which this runs rampant, but in poli-sci, it does. Why? Well, because often when a study is done concerning, and then we're talking about, you know, say down in the mud, operational political science research. When a study is done, there's usually money tied up in the outcome, meaning, you know, somebody wants something from a legislative perspective. You know, they want money tagged in a bill, or they want it sent to their district or their state or wherever, or there is legislation to be pushed that legalizes something, that illegalizes something, or someone wants to get elected or reelected. Okay, so there's often a secondary motivator that becomes the primary driver of the selection of the data to move towards a pre-desired outcome. Watch for that when you're reading through studies, whether you're prepping your literature review for your own study, proposal, research design, or in the future. Look very carefully at the methodology of the researcher. Where do they get their data? What other sources did or did they not look at? Okay, so be an investigator, not an advocate. Okay, back to you, Richard. No one's making this accusation. It's not an accusation of you, Richard. I'm using this very well-written hypothesis to make the point. In this research project, honesty and complete and accurate historical and statistical evidence result in the conclusion being utilized in the 20 U.S. states that do not have the death penalty, or 30 states that currently have the death penalty, depending on the results of the study. In addition, democratic nations that have similar governments and judicial structures may choose to utilize the results to apply to their violent crime situation. Yeah, it could be phrased better. In other words, as an investigator, this is the part why I like this, allow the conclusions to dictate the potential external validity of the research. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Okay, cool. Question number 2, briefly explain how proper use of the sample, the sampling frame, and the study population and the theoretical population can help to minimize research bias, which undercuts your external validity. Okay. Timothy, research bias is the intentional or unintentional influence the researcher may have on the research findings. The inevitable systematic errors introduced the sampling or testing encourages one outcome or another. The following ways help minimize these bias. Okay, and then Tim, you go through the various definitions: sampling bias, selection bias, response bias, performance bias, measurement bias. Okay, so I'm not going to read through those. Good answer, Tim. Everybody, make sure that you have those definitions. Because you may see them again, like I don't know, an examination. Wink. Okay. Question number 3. Explain the following 2 terms: sampling distribution and sampling error. How are they related to the 68, 95, and 99% rule? Okay, Robin, you have an excellent answer here. In fact, Robin even provides you with some really interesting visuals, folks. Okay, so remember this, what I'm going to give you here, I'm going to remember the following fundamental foundation of quantitative research. Okay, one of the core activities, the core interests, the core aims of quantitative research, and it doesn't matter what field you are in, is to sample a group of people and take a survey or look at their historical patterns, figure out what the mean is of that behavior. That is, construct a bell curve. I'm reaching for my magic sticky note pad. Okay. Enter the data in such that you get a bell curve on an X and a Y axis. Okay, there we go. Find the mean, that point in the center. And this is from our, this is from our little n, our sample. Right? And then compare that mean to what we would find in the general population. Now, why do we do that, and who the heck cares? Because, one of the interesting things to me, fascinating things about quantitative research is, although, it's driven by mathematics, and as such, people often say, well, that's science, and it's funny, and I mean funny to me, haha. I hear people say, well, I believe in science. Well, that's nice. I mean, the root word of science, scientia, or scientiare, it's Greek, but I'm giving it to you in the Latin because, we don't use the Greek alphabet. It simply means the acquiring of knowledge, or the process of knowing. And the process of knowing and acquiring knowledge is pretty broad. Okay, so you can have the science of survival. That is, if we dropped you out in the middle of the wilderness, where do you get food, water, and shelter? Well, that's knowledge. That's scientia. That's something you have to know. But in people's minds, science means, oh, this is certainty over here. And then there is religion and faith, which is not scientific. Okay. Um, here's the irony. All right. Underlining, in fact, establishing the foundation for quantitative research is a fundamental assumption, and it's this: that the material reality that we live in is ordered and regularized. All right? It assumes, quantitative research, that there is a regular order to things. So, for example, if you take a coin, and I encourage you to try this one afternoon when you haven't got nothing else to do, maybe it's raining outside or something. If you take a coin like this quarter, okay, sit down with, with somebody else and flip the coin, whack it on your hand, and do it 50 times, and then do 5 sets of 50. And on a piece of paper, set 1, set 2, set 3, set 4, set 5. Count how many heads and how many tails you get. Okay? When you average those together, both for each set, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then all 5 sets combined, you will find that the distribution, the number of heads to the number of tails, is roughly 95%. It's not going to be exactly 50-50. All right, so it'll be, it'll fall within the range of 95% heads, split between heads and tails. So you might get, 45% heads and 55% tails, or 47 tails and 52% heads. You're going to have that 5%. I said 40. I said 55 for the first one. It would be 45. 50. You're going to have that 5% margin where it'll shift back and forth. All right. Why is that? Why is it that we live in this ordered, regularized, systematized material reality that quantitative research assumes is operating? Okay. Well, that is the fundamental question. And the underlying answer to that why is that everything that is ordered has an orderer. For example, here's one of my favorite coffee cups. Okay, it has the Welsh griffin. That's my father's family. We're from Wales. I don't know who made this cup. I don't know who designed this cup, both in terms of the shape and the particular logo. But I'm certain that this cup did not design or make itself. An experiment. What if we took a wheelbarrow full of bricks and we dumped them in a field, and then we carefully observed the bricks, and we watched them for a week, and then for a month, and then for a year, and then 10 years, and 100 years, and then 1,000, 500,000, and 1,000,000 years? What's the statistical probability, would you say, that those bricks will form themselves into a brick wall? 0. Absolutely 0. Why? Because without an ordering force, there's no order. If, as quantitative research assumes, and it's correct, that we live in a regularized, ordered reality, there has to be an external orderer, because a brick isn't going to organize the other bricks into a brick wall. An inanimate cup isn't going to organize itself into other cups. That's one of the interesting things about life. Life is the only organization of material that organizes itself into itself. It makes it very, very different. So the question becomes, what is that orderer that's external to the material reality that we live in? That's God. See, there are two separate questions here in the theology of quantitative work. Is there God? What is God? But to answer the first one, and for those folks that run around and say, well, I believe in science and you people of faith, what they don't understand is that there is no science. That the very fundamental operational premises of what they believe to be separated from religion are rest entirely on proofs that were developed and explained and we sort of wrapped our heads around through religion. All right, now back to Robin and the question. Okay, why do we care about the deviation from the median? Okay, so she takes a look at, she gives you bell graphs for the 68, 95, and 99.7 percentile rule. So you draw the line down the middle, okay, and then 1 degree both left and right. We don't count them both. We go 1 degree left and right. Okay, that's 1 degree of standard deviation. That's 68%. The next one, 2 degrees of deviation from the middle. That's 95%. The next one, 3 degrees of deviation from the middle. That's the 99.7%. Most statistical research operates like this. If a phenomenon that you're studying falls within that 95-degree range, meaning if whatever it is that you're studying occurs 95% of the time, then you can be assured that it is, a regularized force, like say flipping the coin. But let's say you flip your coin 50 times for 5 times and somebody writes down heads or tails while you're doing it. And then you average them up. And it's not 95%. Let's say it's like 70-30 heads, tails. What's going on here? There's some other force acting on that coin than just the normal regularized order of the material world. What is that force? Well, I don't know. Maybe it's a trick coin. Maybe one side is heavier than the other. And it's designed to come up heads more often than tails. Maybe the person writing down heads or tails when you call them out isn't paying attention. That's a force, their incompetence. Maybe the person writing down heads or tails decided they're just going to mess with you. And when you say heads, they write tails. And you say tails, instead of 1, they write 2 tails. Right? That's a force interfering with the normal, established, mechanical operation of reality. And if whatever it is you're studying deviates outside of that 95%, then that's how you know that something is influencing the outcome other than these normal forces. Okay, so look at those bell curves that Robin gives you and spend a little time, wrapping your sort of your head around this. Okay? Because if you get this concept, then you sort of have this aha moment when you get into quantitative research. So much of, I'm not going to say it'll explain the math to you, but so much of why you do the math that you do within quantitative research opens up and makes sense. All right, enough for that. Question number 4, explain the following 2 terms, stratified random sampling and random sampling. How are the 2 practices related? And we could have flipped those around, I suppose, putting things in order. Edward, though, nice answer here. Random sampling, this selects n units of n such that each NCN has an equal chance of being selected. Okay, so when we use the little n, this refers to the sample that we've taken from the general population, the big N. And NC, lowercase n, is the number of combinations from little n from big N. So what we pulled out of big N, okay? That's random sampling, okay? Stratified random sampling involves dividing your population into homogeneous subgroups and then taking a simple random sample in each group. So why would you do that? Okay, so let's say you're in the state of California and you want to find out how a particular policy from your candidate will resonate with the voters or not. Okay, not all policies are going to resonate in the same way with all voters. In fact, all voters aren't going to care about the same policies. So, if you wanted to, for instance, find out how a policy concerning fertilizer use resonated with voters in California, you might expect to get a very different response from people that live in rural agrarian communities, as they live out there in small towns and they work as farmers, as opposed to people who live in large urban communities, say Oakland or San Francisco or Los Angeles. All right. So if you just surveyed Californians and then asked them about this policy, you might not get the most accurate results as you would if you say, okay, we start with all of Californians, and then from that we say, let's ask the people that live in rural areas. So we'll pull that out as a subgroup. Let's ask the people that live in urban areas. We'll pull that out, like cities with 1 million people or more as a base population. We'll pull that out. So we create these subgroups from the larger group. And then from the subgroup, we do random sampling. We just sample at random. Okay. Then we get a picture of what this policy means to the people living in the cities and the people living in the country. And you can apply the conclusions from the people living in the country externally to people living in the country. If you apply those conclusions to people living everywhere, including in the large cities, you probably would not come up with an accurate representation of how it is that people would react to a policy concerning, say, fertilizer use. Okay, so that's what it is, and that's why you do it, right, as a researcher. Okay, all right, everybody, I see our half an hour is up, and then some. All right, I am sorry about the delay for this. I did it, I had it, and then I lost it. I don't know where it went. All right, so I will post the material for week 8. Make sure that you study it. Get ready for the exam. Papers due in 2 days. All right. I'm thinking about you. I'm praying for you. Especially, a special person here is having a crisis in her family. I'm very, very sorry about that. Our many, many prayers for you. And I will see you on Blackboard. Take care. God bless.